The twin domes of the Vatican Observatory tell a story few tourists hear. One sits on a volcanic ridge overlooking Lake Albano near Castel Gandolfo, the papal summer residence. The other crowns Mount Graham in Arizona, where a mirror larger than anything NASA currently deploys collects deep sky light each night. Officially, the Jesuits who staff these facilities track near-Earth asteroids and study the early universe. Unofficially, 3 of their most senior astronomers have hinted at a different agenda, positioning Catholic theology for an age in which our extraterrestrial brothers might step out of the dark. Those men, José Gabriel Funes, Guy Consolmagno and Giuseppe Tanzellanitti, are not fringe figures. Funes directed the observatory until 2015. Consolmagno, a planetary scientist with a doctorate from MIT, succeeded him. Tanzellanitti teaches interreligious dialogue at Rome's Pontifical University. Over a span of interviews and academic essays, they have offered variations on the same idea. The creator of the universe is not limited to one planet, therefore the discovery of intelligent life would neither contradict Scripture nor threaten the faith. Instead, it would expand our understanding of the divine family. For centuries, Rome condemned astronomical findings that clashed with doctrine. Now its own astronomers publicly float scenarios that once belonged to pulp science fiction. Why the rhetorical pivot? Part of the answer lies in simple public relations calculus. If a government agency or private company announces irrefutable evidence of non-human intelligence, religious authority could evaporate overnight unless faith leaders provide a coherent narrative. Better to guide the conversation early than scramble later. A subtler motive, however, is theological. Catholicism rests on the principle that revelation unfolds through history. New cosmic neighbors would mark a historic moment. Integrating them into salvation history before secular voices frame the event keeps the Church in the role of interpreter. The Bible itself contains passages that exotheologians use to show precedent for otherworldly contact. Genesis speaks of the sons of God, who take human wives and beget the Nephilim, a race of giants wiped away by the flood. Ezekiel's vision of wheels within wheels studded with eyes has been reimagined for generations as a craft of unfamiliar design. In the New Testament, Luke describes a power of the Most High, overshadowing Mary, producing a conception without human father. Traditional commentary calls it miraculous overshadowing. The exotheological lens relabels it as biological intervention by an advanced intelligence coordinating with an already chosen bloodline. Critics call that conjecture a demolition of Christian orthodoxy. Yet Tanzellanitti has argued that if incarnate divinity can manifest once, it could manifest through more than one biological medium. The incarnation, in this view, becomes a template rather than a singularity. The Vatican would not discard the gospel. It would recast key episodes as cooperative junctions between heaven and a larger family of rational beings. Skeptics reply that the argument is strategic, not devotional. They point to the location of the Arizona telescope on Mount Graham, a site contested by Native American tribes who consider the mountain sacred. For Rome, the controversy was worth enduring because Mount Graham's dry air and altitude grant unobstructed access to the infrared universe. That wavelength is perfect for detecting exoplanet atmospheres. If spectrographs show non-terrestrial industrial chemistry or structured radio bursts, Vatican scientists want first look. Possession of data before governments decide how to release it would allow Rome to frame the discovery as confirmation of divine universality, not as refutation of scriptural authority. There is another layer, more esoteric, in which end-time symbolism converges with astronomical expectation. The Book of Revelation describes 2 beasts, one from the sea and one from the land, rallying global allegiance through marvels performed in public sight. Early commentators linked those beasts to political empires of their own era. A 21st century reading could substitute the unveiling of a superior technological species and the human institutions that align with it. Under that scenario, the Vatican must decide whether to brand the visitors as allies, fallen powers, or simply unbaptized intelligences deserving missionary outreach. The difference is existential. Designate them malignant and the Church fuels a cosmic holy war. Designate them benign and the Church positions itself as universal mediator. The stakes become clear when we revisit the Annunciation narrative with alien overtones. Suppose, as some exotheologians suggest, that the luminous star guiding Magi was an artificial beacon, and that overshadowing was genomic splicing rather than purely spiritual agency. The point is not to prove the theory correct, evidence is absent, but to test whether faith can absorb such a reading without shattering. If believers can accept that God employed cosmic partners to inaugurate redemption, then extraterrestrial arrival complements rather than cancels the creed. That flexibility is exactly what the Vatican's observatory officials recommend. In published lectures they distinguish dogma, core affirmations such as creation, incarnation, resurrection, from mutable cosmology. The shape of the universe already shifted once when the Church conceded heliocentrism. Accepting other minds in that universe is, they argue, a smaller step. Outside ecclesial circles, scientists have their own doubts. They note that no confirmed biosignature has yet been recorded, and that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. They object that rewriting sacred history based on hypothetical beings courts ridicule. The Jesuit response is pragmatic. Silence breeds rumor, proactive speculation builds credibility. By thinking aloud, the Church demonstrates confidence that reason and revelation need not collide. Psychologists add a final caution. Humanity barely manages tribalism on one planet. Introducing a non-human civilization could trigger mass anxiety, apocalyptic cults, or authoritarian crackdowns. A venerable institution adept at ritual stability might therefore serve a stabilizing role, translating cosmic shock into liturgy and ethics rather than panic. Viewed through that lens, the Vatican stargazing is not eccentric but strategic. As private companies like SpaceX accelerate Mars timelines and radio telescope arrays scan billions of stars, probabilistic arguments for life elsewhere gain traction. If confirmation arrives, whoever controls the first moral story will influence geopolitics and collective identity for generations. Rome would prefer to say, "These beings too are children of God and we anticipated them." None of this proves that Mary was abducted or that Ezekiel saw a metallic wheel. Those claims remain speculative. What is not speculative is the infrastructure and language now in place. The day the International Astronomical Union issues a press release about coherent signals from Proxima Centauri, Vatican spokespeople will quote Funes on cosmic brotherhood, Consolmagno on baptism for aliens if they desire it, Tanzelaniti on expanded Christology. Headlines will read, "Church welcomes extraterrestrial life." Meanwhile, the Mount Graham telescope continues its nightly sweep. Light that began its journey when ancient scribes penned Genesis now descends onto a sensor array owned by the oldest continuous bureaucracy in the West. Somewhere below that dome, a priest astronomer weighs spectral lines and imagines the homily he might preach the morning after first contact. That the God who spoke through prophets also writes in the language of distant suns, and that revelation was never restricted to earthbound ink. Until data replace conjecture, the debate remains suspended between faith and frontier science. Whether listeners approach the question as believers, materialists, or curious onlookers, one fact stands. The institution guarding the tomb of Peter is also peering farther into space than most nation-states can afford. It does so because theology, like evolution, adapts or perishes. If a new branch of the cosmic family tree appears, the Vatican intends to greet it not as heresy but as another verse in a song it has been singing for 2 millennia. Keep an eye on official bulletins from the Observatory and the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Watch how the language shifts when astronomers publish spectra hinting at chlorophyll or industrial byproducts around a nearby star. And remember the guiding question behind Rome's quiet sky watching. Will the first whisper of distant intelligence sound like a threat, or like an invitation to enlarge the word neighbor? A sobering possibility remains. What if the first verified contact is not a graceful descent of enlightened beings but a garbled transmission? Mathematical pulses, indecipherable glyphs, or a fragmentary image hinting at motives we cannot parse? In that situation, a vacuum of meaning forms instantly. Governments will classify, markets will convulse, social media will fabricate narratives by the hour. The tradition most practiced at holding ambiguity, liturgical silence, symbolic language, centuries spent harmonizing paradox, could be surprisingly well suited to guide collective patience. Jesuit astronomers sometimes explain their vocation with an aphorism. Faith asks why, science asks how, wonder begins when the two questions meet. Their telescopes on Mount Graham and Castel Gandolfo embody that convergence. Every night a CCD chip records photons older than humanity. Every morning a chapel bell calls the observers to prayer. The rhythm is deliberate. Data without contemplation breeds hubris. Contemplation without data breeds superstition. Between those extremes lies a narrow path along which new revelation, if it arrives, might walk without stumbling. For ordinary listeners, the practical takeaway is simpler than Vatican intrigue. Assume that intelligent life exists elsewhere and ask, what habits of mind prepare us to meet it? Curiosity without panic, humility without self-loathing, an ethic that treats unfamiliar consciousness as neighbor rather than resource. Those habits start locally: how we greet migrants, how we handle biological diversity, how we respond to disruptive technology. A civilization that cannot welcome difference across its own borders will not fare well when difference arrives from the stars. So the secret, if there is one, hides in plain sight. The Bible's cosmic horizon has always been wider than later dogmas allowed, and the Church's telescopes look outward not merely for scientific prestige but to rehearse humanity for a larger community. Whether tomorrow's revelation proves to be microbial fossils on Mars or a diplomatic signal from Alpha Centauri, the conversation about spirit and cosmos has already begun, quietly under twin domes, where ancient parchment meets modern glass. The rest of us have time, perhaps only a little, to decide what story we will tell when the sky speaks back.